Okay, problems 21 through 23 is what I'm about to work. 21 is 4i times negative 6 plus 5i minus 2i times 5 minus I squared. Okay, so first I'm going to address what I need to be doing. On this first term, I know I need to multiply the 4i times those two terms because it's outside the parentheses, so I need to distribute. 4i times negative 6 is a negative 24i, and 4 times 5i is a positive 20i squared, but I know the I squared is negative 1, so that basically just makes that minus 20. Okay? Now, what a lot of people are tempted to do right here is to distribute the 2i. But you have to remember that when you multiply, no, that didn't really help any. When you're multiplying a constant or a coefficient, a scalar, whatever you want to say, times something that's being raised to a power, you cannot distribute inside that. That power, I mean, we see the square as not something as powerful as the square root, but that would be the same thing as me saying I can't do this. I cannot distribute a 2 inside a square root. It's a power. And maybe you don't know that yet, but the square root is the same thing as the square in that it's just a power, and you cannot distribute it when something is being raised to a power. Which means I have to apply this first. I have to do the square first. So out to the side, I'm going to figure out what 5 minus I squared is. And it's not, you cannot do this. You cannot distribute the square. Okay? That'd be like saying, and because a lot of people do say it, if I said 4 plus 3 squared, and you're like, oh, it's 16 plus 9, which is 25. I'd say, well, isn't 4 plus 3 7? And what's 7 squared? That's 49. Those are not the same thing, because this one is wrong. Okay? You cannot distribute a square when you're adding or subtracting, only when you're multiplying or dividing. So I'm going to go ahead and do 5 minus I squared by multiplying it by itself. Okay? 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times negative I is negative 5i. Negative I times 5 is negative 5i. And negative I times negative I is a positive I squared. And if you need to, think about this being a 1. But I squared is a negative 1, so basically just makes it a negative. Okay? 25 minus 1 is 24. Negative 5i minus 5i is negative 10i. So this squared, 5 minus I squared, is 24 minus 10i. So I'm going to rewrite that as minus 2i times 24 minus 10i. And I'm going to keep simplifying. So I know this is negative 24i minus 20. Now I've got minus 48i, because negative 2i times 24 is negative 48. And then I've got negative 2i times negative 10i. And negative 2 times negative 10 is a positive 20. I times I is I squared, and I squared makes that negative, right? So I need to combine like terms and make sure to put the imaginary part last and the real first, okay? So the real numbers I have are negative 20 and negative 20, and negative 20 minus 20 is a negative 40, and then negative 24i and negative 48, I'm pretty sure on that. Let me just clarify. Negative 24i, positive negative 20, 25, minus 1, so 24, yeah. So negative 48, okay, I'm good. 24 and 48 add up to 72. Yes. So minus 72i. Okay. So there's 21. Always remember to do the power before you do the multiplication. Square the term before you distribute the 2i, or the negative 2i. Okay, on number 22. So 22 is interesting in that it's got negative 1 plus 2i cubed plus 10 times negative 4 minus 7i. So you have to think, okay, in order to cube something, that means I have to multiply it by itself 3 times. So this is actually negative 1 plus 2i times negative 1 plus 2i times negative 1 plus 2i. And then plus all that. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute my 10. Minus 40. 10 times the negative 4 is a negative 40. And then 10 times negative 7i is minus 70i. Now, keep in mind, this doesn't become multiplication. I'm not all of a sudden multiplying by this. This is a plus sign. You should never, if there's a plus sign or a minus sign, like on the last problem, between two expressions, you are not multiplying them. You are adding or subtracting them, okay? I was adding, but because I got a negative, I am now subtracting. Not a big deal. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start simplifying this. Now, I don't really care which terms you multiply first. I'm going to go ahead and multiply, like I said, doesn't really matter. Oop. Oh well. But most people multiply the first two, and that's fine. Negative 1 times negative 1 is a positive 1. Negative 1 times 2i is a negative 2i. Now I'm going to distribute the 2i. 2i times negative 1 is a negative 2i. 2i times 2i is a positive 4i squared. And positive 4i squared is a negative 4. Okay. Which means I've got 1 minus 4, which simplifies to a negative 3. And then I've got negative 2i and negative 2i. That's a negative 4i. So that right there is these two multiplied together. But I've still got to multiply that times, I guess I can do that, negative 1 plus 2i. Okay? And I've still got to subtract. So don't forget. Minus 40 minus 70i. You don't have to write all the numbers down every time. I'm writing down so we don't forget. Okay. Marker crop out of anything else. Okay. So let me distribute this now. I've got a negative 3 times a negative 1. So negative 3 times negative 1 is a positive 3. Negative 3 times 2i is a negative 6i. Now I've got to distribute the negative 4i. Negative 4i times negative 1 is a positive 4i. And negative 4i times a positive 2i, well, negative 4 times 2 is a negative 8. So negative 8i squared, because I times I, is a positive 8. If you get an I here, you got I, and you combine these three terms, you're wrong. I mean, you should never be able to add 3 out of the 4 terms when you distribute, okay? So, this right here, all of that, is this, and 8 plus 3 is 11, and negative 6i plus 4i is a negative 2i, okay? So I have successfully combined, or multiplied out, all, this cubed, so this times itself, down to 11 minus 2i. And don't forget, we are now subtracting 40 and subtracting 70i. So 11 minus 40 is negative 29. And negative 2i and negative 70i is a negative 72i. Okay? So that is my final expression. Number 23, I've got negative 3i times negative 2 minus I times negative 2 plus 5i plus 1 minus 5i times negative 4 minus I. Okay, so this is just a bunch of making sure that you understand the order of operations. I am going to be adding these, so I'm going to make sure that I don't try to multiply these two expressions because I do not need to. Okay. Now when I multiply this times this times this, you have a couple different ways of approaching this. If you're multiplying 3 terms together, you multiply 2 of them, and then you multiply that times the answer. So if I said 2 times 3 times 5, you would say, well, 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 times 5 is 30. Or 3 times 5 is 15, and 15 times 2 is 30. Or 2 times 5 is 10, and 10 times 3 is 30. But what you don't do is distribute a 2 to the 3 and to the 5. You don't say it's 2 times 3 times 2 times 5. We do not do that. So when you multiply 3 terms, you multiply 2 of them, and then you multiply the answer times the third term. Okay. Now, a lot of people will decide to multiply this out first. That's probably what I would end up doing. But there's also a lot of you that would distribute the 3i to the first one. I don't really care. I'm actually going to do what I said first. I'm going to multiply these two out first, and then I'm going to distribute a negative 3i to it. So I've got negative 3i times. So I'm going to multiply these. Negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive 4. Negative 2 times 5i is a negative 10i. Negative I times negative 2 is a positive 2i. And negative I times positive 5i is a negative 5i squared, which makes it a positive 5. Okay? So I know I have negative 3i times, and let me just combine terms in the interior. To be clear, I don't know, I kind of went over it fast, but negative I times 5i, if you need to, write it out. Negative I times 5i. A negative 1 times 5 is a negative 5, and I times I is I squared. And I squared is negative 1, so that makes it a positive 5. I've got 4 plus 5, which is 9. I'm almost done. And then negative 10i plus 2i is a negative 8i. And then I would distribute the negative 3i. So negative 3i times 9 is a negative 27i, and negative 3i times negative 8i is a positive 24i squared. Positive 24i squared is a negative 24. Okay, that is only the first term. So don't forget that I am still adding. Okay, I've got to add what's going on over here. So let me do that. I've got a 1 times a negative 4, which is a negative 4. A 1 times a negative I, which is a negative I. A negative 5i times a negative 4, which is a positive 20i. And a negative 5i times a negative I. So a negative 5i times a negative 1 is a positive 5. I times I is I squared. So it's a positive 5i squared, which makes it a negative 5. Which makes this negative 4, negative 5 is a negative 9. Negative I plus 20i is like negative 1i plus 20i. That's 19i. So I'm adding a negative 9 plus 19i, or if you will, subtracting 9 and adding that to 9. Okay, so let's combine like terms. Real with real, negative 24 and negative 9 is a negative 33. And negative 27i and positive 19i, that is a negative 8i. Yeah. And if I make a mistake, I know you'll let me know. Okay. The name of the game on 22 or 21 through 23 is order of operations, so be very careful.